How can a good God let bad things happen? Is the problem of evil a good argument against Christianity? And what does the Christian story say to those who are suffering? If you've ever asked any of those questions, then check this out. Undoubtedly, the problem of evil is the strongest argument against Christianity. Bone cancer in children, plagues and pandemics, genocidal dictators, even natural disasters. When you zoom out to take stock of the terror and the tears, this just doesn't look like a world that a loving God would create. To the best of our knowledge, the first person to put pen to papyrus and clearly spell out the problem of evil was the Greek philosopher Epicurus. His original version of the argument sought to show that a world full of evil and suffering was incompatible with omnipotence and omnibenevolence. That if God is all-powerful, then he could stop bad things from happening. And if God is all-loving, then he should want to stop bad things from happening. So surely the pervasive scale and horrendous nature of the suffering in our world serves as evidence that God either isn't there or that he doesn't really care. Well, that's certainly how I felt. When I was 9, we had a family car accident on a holiday where, after headbutting a truck at high speed, my mum suffered serious brain damage. And although she survived, our family was changed forever by that tragedy, and any childlike belief that I had in a loving God was torpedoed by that roadside. So the disorienting force of our own personal pain, alongside serious versions of the intellectual problem, especially those that highlight unspeakable evils and inexplicable dimensions of natural suffering, these are what make the problem of evil, beyond doubt, the strongest argument against Christianity. So how does the Christian story then speak to the problem of evil? Well, perhaps the first thing to say is that suffering is not a uniquely Christian problem. Because even if you get rid of God and adopt some version of the secular story, you still have to make sense of suffering somehow. For while the problem of evil traditionally takes aim at the internal logic of the Christian story, I would argue that in the absence of God, you bump into an entirely new problem of evil. Namely, how do you account for the evilness of evil and the wrongness of suffering? Because as it turns out, if naturalism is true, then these deep intuitions that originally raised the objection to Christianity in the first place, they end up being either hard to explain or undermined entirely. But a commitment to the evilness of evil and the wrongness of suffering, to those who sense protest at the way that things are, that's something that finds resonance within the Christian story. A story which I've discovered not only goes a long way to answering Epicurus' challenge, but also to animating a hope that is worth believing in for those who are suffering. So let me share 3 ways that the Christian story speaks helpfully to the problem of evil. First, the Christian story offers some answers. Within the very first few pages of the Bible, the opening chapters of Genesis unfold that rather than opting to create some sterile universe where creatures are programmed to obey God's every command, instead God chose to create a meaningful universe, one where human beings are capable of deep and meaningful relationships, love, and a meaningful role as the gardeners and governors of our planet, where what we do affects the environment. But for such a world to be impossible, it was necessary for God to imbue humanity with significant moral freedom, inescapably opening the door for us to reject God's wisdom, to go against God's good design, and so become damaged by evil. Now you might say, well, surely an all-powerful God should be able to create free creatures who always choose to do what God wants, right? But why think that's even possible? Perhaps such a thing is a logical impossibility, on par with God creating a married bachelor, rendering it a nonsense notion beyond the reach of omnipotence. You see, bound by the logic of his own mind, God can do all possible things. So no appeal to divine omnipotence can translate nonsense into the realm of reality. So being animated by love himself, to create a world where love was possible, perhaps this is the best possible world God could create to secure for us a meaningful existence, even if, for a time, God's good design has become damaged by evil. And this free will defense is just one of a dozen or so different explanations or theodicies that Christian thinkers have drawn out of the Christian story to show that it offers some answers as to why a good God might let bad things happen. Second, the Christian story speaks to the problem of evil by questioning whether, as finite beings, we should expect to have all the answers right now. Take the story of Job in the Jewish wisdom literature. There you have this relatively good guy who undergoes a series of unfortunate events, sparking him to eventually question heaven's justice. And heaven answers. God enters the conversation between Job and his friends, only God doesn't spell out the reason for Job's suffering. No. Instead, God asks Job a series of 64 questions about cosmology and meteorology and zoology, which leave Job utterly silenced, unable to answer a single one. But it's precisely in wrestling with the complexity of reality and coming to face with the bigness of God that Job realizes how omniscience, of God possessing perfect knowledge of all things past, present, and future, means God might have reasons for allowing suffering even when Job can't see them. And as hard as that may be for us to accept, if God really can look through the corridors of time to see how each free will decision and event echoes down into eternity, then only God is in a position to know if he has good reasons for letting things play out as they do. So we don't have all the answers. Maybe God leaves us in this fog of uncertainty right now because we can't comprehend his reasons, or because knowing them right ahead of time may undermine his ultimate endgame. Which means this question ultimately, it comes down to trust. Genesis teaches us that there are some answers. Job teaches us that we don't get all the answers, and we have to each decide whether we have enough to believe in or trust a God who lets us suffer, that he is there, that he does care. Which leads to third, the Christian story centers around Jesus, where God's ultimate response to the problem of evil is not an explanation, but an incarnation. You see, Jesus claimed to be the invisible God made visible. That if you've seen Jesus, you've seen the Father. And so Jesus is our window into exactly how God feels when we suffer, and what he intends to do about it. At the graveside of his dead friend Lazarus, Jesus broke down and wept alongside two grieving sisters. God is not cold or distant, untouched by our pain, but is profoundly grieved by the suffering of those whom he loves. And God's deep wells of compassion, they stir him to act. Jesus treated suffering and sickness and death as enemies of humanity, going to war with the symptoms of a world damaged by evil through his own ministry of miracles, restoring beauty to the blind, music to the deaf, and dancing to the lame. And all of this was a mere foretaste of the world to come, as Jesus pointed those who are suffering now forward to a substantial hope. That to all who believe in him, suffering, it doesn't get the final word. Death is not a full stop that ends the human story. Because in the last pages of the Christian story, a revelation promises that, like the intimate act of me wiping tears from my boys' eyes when they're hurt, Jesus too will wipe away the tears of this life's suffering as we enter into a new creation. A place where there is no more death or mourning or crying or pain anymore, for the former things have passed away. And this isn't just some whimsical hope, some pie in the sky when we die. No, it is a sure hope, firmly established by Jesus' own resurrection from the dead. And at the heart of the Christian story, God's response to our suffering was to step into the fray. The Gospels record Jesus experienced betrayal and beating, abandonment and exhaustion, being denied by his disciples and feeling the dark skies of a silent heaven. His own brutal torture is well documented in our medical literature, where you can trace the agony of his scourging to the excruciating pain of his crucifixion. Jesus is a God with scars. So for those who wonder if God can be trusted in your suffering, Calvary's cross serves as the unimpeachable proof that despite our suffering, God really is there, and he really does care. And if God the Father can take the suffering of Jesus on the cross and somehow turn it around to open a door of salvation to the world, what does that say about the ways that God can imbue our own suffering with meaning and purpose? Suffering doesn't have to be pointless, nor does it have to destroy us, but God can transform our suffering to become the forge through which he shapes us into heavenly beings. So the Christian story, it offers the resources to make sense of why something feels wrong with the world, alongside some answers as to why a good God might let bad things happen. It offers hope for our future and meaning in our pain. And for what we cannot know, what we don't yet see, God's greatest gift to those who are suffering is not simply a why, but a who. And since we cannot escape suffering in this life and running away from God is simply a dead end, why not try running towards God instead? For if we have to suffer, I would much rather suffer with Jesus than suffer without him. G'day, it's Dan here from Questioning Christianity. We are all about helping you connect the Christian story to life's deepest questions. So if you're enjoying the content, why don't you subscribe and click the bell on YouTube that you can go ahead and follow us on socials.